Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again on our panels during the conference. This is the concluding panel, a very long one. We have some 2 hours of debate. We have a panel with distinguished guests and experts. First of all, to my left, Professor Irena Lipowicz. Let me introduce Professor Lipowicz with a few sentences. She has been, until recently, the Ombudsman of the Republic of Poland. In 1976, she graduated with honors from the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Silesia, which is Silesia, the famous region, is not far from here. And since 1980, Irena Lipowicz has been a member of Solidarność Trade Union, the famous legendary opposition movement. She was one of the founding members of its Upper Silesian division. After the fall of communism in 1981 to 2002, she was a member of the Constitutional Committee of the National Assembly, which drafted the Constitution of the Republic of Poland of 1997. Briefly, she has also been the ambassador to the Republic of Austria, and she also has been ambassador representative of the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the relations between Federal Republic of Germany and the Republic of Poland. Between 2006 and 2010, a teacher at the Warsaw School of Social Sciences and Humanities, and also she has many awards and awards and many other degrees, honoris causa. So, Professor Lipowicz, welcome. Then, Professor Marek Kucia of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Professor Marek Kucia studied political science and sociology at the Jagiellonian University and philosophy at the Oxford University. He received a PhD and an extended PhD in sociology from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and he carried postdoctoral research at Oxford, working for Gallup poll in London. Since 1993, he has worked in the Institute of Sociology at the Jagiellonian University. He served as deputy director and director of the institute. In the institute, he heads the Department of Sociology of Power. He was a guest lecturer at many European and American universities. As a Marie Curie Fellow, he worked in Lund University. His research is sociological relations, sociological theory, European integration, Europeanization, social memory, Auschwitz Holocaust studies, Polish-Jewish relations, and anti-Semitism. He wrote some books on and articles on that, on these subjects. Professor Kucia, welcome to our panel. Further to the left from me, Professor Stephen Katz holds the Alvin and Shirley Slater Chair in Jewish Holocaust Studies at Boston University, Massachusetts, and he is the former director of Elie Wiesel Center for Jewish Studies. He received his PhD from the University of Cambridge at the beginning of the 70s. Prior to coming to Boston, he taught at Dartmouth College and then Cornell University, where he chaired the Department of Near Eastern Studies. He is a member and former co-chair of the Academic Committee of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, chair of the Holocaust Commission of the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture, and also the advisor to the chair of the more than 30 countries that belong to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. He has published numerous works on the history of Holocaust and Jewish philosophy. Professor Katz, welcome. On the edge of the table is Dr. Piotr Trojański from Krakow. Professor Trojański is historian, assistant professor at the Institute of History at the Pedagogical University of Krakow. He is also lecturer at the Center for Holocaust Studies at the Jagiellonian University, also in Krakow. Academic advisor for the International Center of Education about Auschwitz and the Holocaust, and director of postgraduate studies on totalitarianism, Nazism, and Holocaust. He specializes in modern Jewish history, history didactics, and especially in education on the Holocaust subject. He is a member of the Polish delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance and a former member. Professor Trojański, welcome. My name is Jacek Stawiski. I'm a journalist and a historian. I also specialized as a historian in Polish-Jewish relations and Holocaust studies. The main question to our panel is, what will be the importance of Auschwitz in the future? At the beginning, I will give some minutes to every member of the panel to speak their ideas and their convictions and their response to that question. But at the beginning, I would like to think a little bit about, for some seconds, about the term future. As with the term past is also very relative. For instance, the First World War has, in my opinion, entered history. It's no one who lived in the First World War lives. So that's the real past. The Second World War, with the horrific events of the Holocaust, still is something we remember. Not me, but many people who come here, and this is not history in proper terms. So maybe that's the same with the future. There is future we can imagine tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, but there is also future that we are unable to imagine. The future we will not know, we will never experience. So maybe with this question I also will ask something, what will be the importance of Auschwitz in the future we can imagine, and in the future we will never know, we will never witness. Professor Lipowicz.
Thank you very much. We are now in this room where first time I could organize the conference for the judges and prosecutors of Poland. And on one side was the Minister of Justice, or General, not Minister of Justice, Vice Minister, but General Prosecutor, and also the presidents of the Administrative Court, and also President of Constitutional Court in the center. It was very important for me as an ombudsman of Poland, and I tried to organize it a few years long, because I thought we need an example and the sign. We still had problems with the local judges or prosecutors when the hate speech or anti-Semitism problems came in the procedure, and sometimes it was taken not especially seriously. It was very important that judges sitting here could feel the history, could after 5 years of visiting in very qualified tour the museum, the memorial, could really discuss their individual experience and to confront this experience with their daily activity. And for me, it is, I cannot speak for whole Europe, or the world, but for Poland, I think the future in this activity of memorial is also to bring this experience to the elite, to the special groups. Of course, the whole activity is normal, as usual, but it's also important to confront the experience, the universal experience of Auschwitz, with the politics of today, with the parliament of today. And doctors or judges. It's important because the times are changing. We have the last survivors. So we have to transform the experience as universal experience of, it was the biggest assault of human dignity and its ultimate experience of Auschwitz. So I believe strong that it will be very important for the future of the community of democracy, of the community of values. It was the idea of Professor Geremek that, of course, Europe is important, transatlantic relations are important, but the real confrontation, it will be not so much clash of civilization, but it will be the family of democratic nations and the other family who don't like democracy and where the values are not so important for the policy of today. But if you want to represent this family of democratic nations, we have to believe strong in values, and we have to show on example of Auschwitz what this opposite side of this word, sunny word of values. And what was the worst experience of humanity. But sometimes in individual protest or underground activity, we could even here meet a wonderful experience of the human being, but only in extremely tragic situation. I don't know how it would be the first point. The second point, maybe it's only emotional speech, or maybe it's only idealistic vision. Maybe what I'm saying now is not very typical for a lawyer. I'm a professor of law and not sociology or history. I think that our common experience with South Korea was very significant here. We have had very good discussion with first with small delegation of South Korea and then bigger one about reconciliation, and it was the discussion if the example of Polish-German reconciliation process where I was involved so long can be an example, for instance, for the South Korean-Japanese reconciliation, because we don't speak here about South and North Korea, about reconciliation still. But it was one step to this universal value of the family of democratic nations. The second one was our meeting with South Korea about lessons from Auschwitz, very important for the North Korea experience. Because in the discussion with Ombudsman of Korea, South Korea, Democratic Republic of Korea, I understood that they have similar problem with the survivors of the North Korean concentration camps, as Professor Kempinski and other Polish psychiatric experts had with the survivors of Auschwitz. Many of them took themselves their lives after the war. The traumatization was so high, so terrible, that it was not very easy to understand for the common people how you can survive Auschwitz and then you cannot survive the quiet and peaceful years. And in the first years after the war, so many people, also in my city, it was clear that many of the survivors took themselves their lives, and you know this phenomena also in Israel, I think, or in United States, where the survivors came. Professor Kempinski made the research how you can not only why it's coming, we know precisely why when you really study the experience of these persons. But also in Auschwitz studies, medicine studies, you can find the methods how you can help them. And the South Korea today have the same phenomena that the people can escape, can come to the South Korea, but they can't survive. So we can see that the experience of Auschwitz and then the experience of how to help the people who so extremely suffered can be universal. But we can, so it was very fruitful visit here in Auschwitz, the Korean experts by Mr. Stawiski. And I could understand that we had such terrible wars after 45. We had such terrible things also in our whole world. But since Auschwitz, the only example when you can compare the reality are the concentration camps of North Korea today. And also this experience, how to explain, how to help, how to make the education, all these examples of today's discussion, it was for me extremely interesting, and also I could understand how much we are. So I could remember our first experience in Polish-German center here in Oświęcim, deutsch-polnische Begegnungsstätte here, and I can remember all these difficulties all these years in explanation, in pedagogic. But now I could see that the experience of Yad Vashem or experience of many other centers, also Polish centers and memorial of Auschwitz, is now really very, very modern, very fruitful, and I cannot add very much to this. You are the experts. What I could add is only we can, and it's the answer, I think, a little. We have to change, as the professors meeting our students, we have to change now our mode of our lectures, because the generation, the Facebook generation, is quite new generation. If I want to attract concentration of my students, I have to be active in another way as 10 years ago. It's a new era. So if I have to change my lectures in administrative law, then more we have to change in future the methods, not only in social media, not only in e-learning, but simply in our attitude, explaining Auschwitz, to bring the example, to make the people active. So it's my only answer. So I think, because it's the experience of limits of dignity of the men and women, so I think it will be always very important. It will have also political meaning. We have to all the time to change the methods, to go together with the new generations, and to think over that it's very important experience, core experience for the family of democratic nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lipowicz. Experience of Auschwitz will be the most important experience for the family of democratic nations. That's the concluding sentence. So thank you very much. And now, Professor Marek Kucia, your answer to my general question: what will be the importance of Auschwitz in the future?
Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, let me answer this question from my sociological point of view. a perspective of a researcher who has studied how people in this country, in Poland, perceive Auschwitz, what they remember about Auschwitz, and what they know about it. My short answer to this question is a little pessimistic. Auschwitz will have a lesser importance for the people in this country, and I believe worldwide. However, it may have a greater importance only thanks to, or only if, the institutions of remembrance, which are the frames for social memory of Auschwitz and the Holocaust, would be active in promoting the memory of Auschwitz. That's the short answer to the question. If I may elaborate on it, I will do so. Well, from my research, it comes out that the people in this country are generally familiar with the most important characteristics, both past and present, historical and symbolic, of Auschwitz. If there are three such characteristics, number one, Auschwitz as the site and symbol of genocide, crime against humanity. The second being Auschwitz as a site and symbol of the martyrdom of the Polish nation, and third being Auschwitz as the site and the symbol of the Holocaust, that is the annihilation of Jews. Almost 95% of representative samples which I asked through some reputable polling opinion organizations answered to each of those items, yes, this is the case. So this is very optimistic. Over the 9 in 10 of inhabitants of this country are aware and have been aware since I've researched this of the three major functions. The other functions are not historical functions of Auschwitz, are not so well known among the population, but that's the space for educational activity. Then if you look how this has changed over the years, there is one question which was asked by various polling organizations, and also I asked this question in my surveys. That is the question about one most important aspect of Auschwitz to our respondents. And over the year, people who were given three options, Auschwitz as being primarily a Polish site and symbol, and or Auschwitz being primarily a Jewish site and symbol. What is very significant is that the percentage of answers to the second option has grown from a marginal figure of 8% in 1995 to a remarkable figure of over 30% in 2010. That's been the growth of the awareness of the importance of Auschwitz as a Jewish site, historical and symbolic. At the same time, however, there is this pretty large contingent of people in Poland, between 30 and 40%, depending on a survey, who say that to them personally, Auschwitz is primarily a Polish symbol. And we mustn't dismiss this point of view, because there are still a lot of people in this country whose members of families might have been prisoners of Auschwitz, either ethnic Poles or Polish Jews, right? And even if those people choose the Polish option, they do not dismiss at all the Jewish option, which can be supported by the results of the earlier question which I referred to. If this is so good, so why am I so pessimistic in answering Mr. Chairman's and the conference's question? Well, that's the spontaneous and prompted answers to another question which I have asked a number of times in the past years. The question about the significance of Auschwitz in Poland's history. Now, this question received the most answers the first time I asked it in the mid-90s. Then in 2000, when I asked it the second time, a little fewer answers. And then in 2010, when I last asked this question, the answers were even lower. The changes are not drastic. It's not a rapid decline, but a tendency is clear. For people, Auschwitz is fading away. But it's not only Auschwitz, it's also other events of the Second World War. As Mr. Chairman remarked at the beginning of our session, the First World War is history. The Second World War is becoming history. The 70-year period which we've just passed, right, this year in January, which is the 2 or 3 generation period where we have the witnesses of history passing away, being fewer and fewer. In the next couple of years, there will be fewer people who would be able to tell us about Auschwitz from their own experience, and even fewer of those who knew people who told them about Auschwitz from their experience. And that's why it will be less significant for the people in Poland. However, it will not fade away from social memory completely, I believe. Now, I believe that, and that's the theory of social and cultural memory which supports my view, that the special role here can be played by what is called the institutions of remembrance. And among them, I would first mention the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum in Oświęcim. And I would stress the role of the authentic site on which this museum and memorial is located. And then I would also stress the role of the main exhibition, which is being redesigned and is going to be recreated. Because these are the authentic site, and the exhibition are the media through which individuals and people as groups can witness history on the site. And then I would also stress the role of guides, because it's no good to be self-guided here on this site or in any other memorial or museum. And the majority of the visitors to this site either come as groups and are guided by guides of the museum, or join tours and are guided by the tour guides. This is highly important what those guides will be telling those groups. Therefore, it is very important how they will be trained. And I understand and I know that the museum is working very hard on training the guides, right? But that's only one aspect of the institutions of remembrance, the museum. There is also education. Now, we do not have much influence, most of us sitting in this room, on how much education on Auschwitz there is in the Polish or Swedish or whichever educational system. But through training teachers, we can actually encourage teachers. This is what the museum does. And this is what we also scholars do when talking to teachers at various occasions, or training or teaching our students. We can actually highlight certain aspects. It is impossible to cover everything. But what is important is to be selective and focused on the key aspects of the past. And then there are the media. The third most important, or third out of the 3 important institutions of remembrance. The media cover various things related to Auschwitz. What I believe is of the utmost importance is the coverage of the commemorative events. Because through the commemorative events, such as the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, which we observed in January this year, this is how the widest possible audience, both in Poland and the wider world, could receive the message about this place. But the commemorations, how do they come about? Well, this is, of course, very much dependent upon the political elites, right? Who comes along? Who is the host of this commemoration? Let us think for a while about the future. For the 80th anniversary, which is bound to come, shall we have the president of this country being the host of the commemorations? Shall we have the president of this country being the host of the commemorations this coming January, the 71st anniversary? If the VIPs come, then the media will cover it, and then the ordinary people will know about it, and they will know more. And then they might be interested in knowing more through history books, through visiting the site, through various other means. So let me conclude by saying that although I believe, and this is what theory and research into social memory indicates, that the memory of the past fades away. That's inevitable. However, it will never fade away completely, because there are the institutions of remembrance, the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, education, the media, the political elites. And let us believe that all of those will work towards the keeping up of the memory of Auschwitz. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Marek Kucia. The concluding sentence, let me remind it, memory fades away, but it hopefully will never completely fade away. There are many, many ways to preserve that memory and to pass it to future generations. Now I give the floor to Professor Stephen Katz from Boston.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a very interesting 3 days. I must say the subject we were given is very challenging. The future is always open. It's unpredictable. I remember what they used to say in Russia. They asked a Russian historian to tell them about the future of Russia. He said, in Russia it's hard enough to predict the past, because every time Stalin changed his mind, they had to rewrite the great encyclopedia. And in Mao's case, they asked Mao what he thought of the French Revolution, and he said it's too soon to tell. So predicting the past, one has to be very cautious and deliberate. I would not talk about Polish, I'm not an expert on local Polish events, but globally, looking at this event from outside, trying to see it from a more general, universal perspective, I think that the symbol of Auschwitz will continue to remain very prominent. And that's because when one has a conversation or reads anything about evil or about morality or about any kind of subject dealing with these sorts of subjects, inevitably the subject turns on a reference to Auschwitz. There have actually been studies to show that almost every conversation about moral issues eventually winds up using Auschwitz as an image, as a symbol, as a proof. Now, of course, a lot of that is very bad. It's a lot of relativizing. It's a lot of misunderstanding. But the fact of the matter is Auschwitz is an enormously powerful symbol. And until something else, which I hope will never be the case, comes along, it will be the gold standard of evil. And therefore, it will continue to reverberate in the international intellectual arena and even among simple people. Secondly, I would say that there's a very important intellectual discussion that goes on, drawn from Auschwitz, which will continue to go on, and that's the role of technology and bureaucracy in our lives. Primo Levi called Auschwitz a machine that turned us into beasts. Well, extrapolating from that somewhat broadly, we all are confronted with the issues of a technological society. What is the morality of a technological society? Do we just worry about productivity? Do we just worry about efficiency? Do we just worry about profits? Do we worry about any kind of moral values? Do we institute those in our legislation, in our labor law, and so on? And I think that this conversation, which was made famous first by Raoul Hilberg, and then the Horkheimer Adorno School, and in a very odd way by Hannah Arendt in her book on Eichmann, and then more recently in Zygmunt Bauman's bad book, you have this central issue of technology and bureaucracy as a defining fact of modern life. Thirdly, I would say that Auschwitz will continue to be important because, as our distinguished ombudsman said, about the corruption of politics. It's the ultimate symbol, perhaps with Stalinism, even more than Stalinism, because of the Führer principle. At least in Russia, it was possible for Khrushchev to criticize Stalin. A Nazi could never criticize Hitler because he was beyond all politics. The fact is, it is the ultimate symbol of the corruption of evil, the degeneracy of evil, And of course today it's absolutely relevant because we see in Europe and other parts of the world creeping tendencies that are unhealthy against democratic regimes, against democratic forms. I, over the last year or two, have been to Greece, which has the Golden Dawn, Hungary, which has a very right-wing party that has almost 20% of the vote. There are other places I won't mention that have recently had elections where there have been a movement to the right. So this issue of Auschwitz as a symbol of politics, a corruption of politics, the takeover of politics, that is something I think will continue long into the future. And I think fourth of all, it will be a matter of teaching us to be very, very, very careful, skeptical about ideologies that lay blame, that lay stereotypes, that use race, that use class, that use religion, that use ethnicity to divide the human family. These ideologies, which we all know about in the Nazi period, the neo-Darwinian issue of the survival of the fittest, the Manichaean issue of light and dark, the racial division between Menschen and Untermenschen, Supermenschen, all of these things are absolutely essential lessons that I think will continue to be learned. People who study the Shoah will become suspect, I hope, of all ideological pronouncements that promise total solutions and always look to someone else as the cause of the evil, the cause of the problem. And today, again, we have in ISIS and others, we have ideologies of exactly that kind. Also, I thought when I was given this assignment to think about, I tried to think, is there anything, these are all warnings, right? The warning against ideologies, the warning against politics, the warning against technology, the warning against evil. But is there any positive that the future will remember? And I think that there are things that we should also bear in mind. First of all, the whole emphasis in the international arena on human rights has certainly emerged from the discussion of the Holocaust. So that, I think, is a memory very profound. When people talk about human rights, it's inevitable that they mention Auschwitz, they mention the Shoah, and so I think that's something the future will learn. For example, the 1984 Convention of the UN on Torture is a direct result of conversations about legitimate behavior by governments. Also, we have the Convention on Genocide, the UN Convention on Genocide. It's not a good convention in the sense the way it was drawn. It was a compromise and it's got a lot of problems, but it still has been functional. Under the Convention for Genocide, which inevitably refers to Auschwitz, you've had the Rwanda trials, you've had the Srebrenica trials, you've had other kinds of international events where the future, which is us, we're 70 years after, have learned from the events of Auschwitz to pass certain kinds of rules that are significant in the way the international community operates. Now, the international community doesn't operate very functionally. We see that in Syria, where 300,000 people have been killed and nobody can agree on anything. The UN was very late in Rwanda because Kofi Annan lost his nerve. It's been late in Darfur. But there have been successes in Kenya and other places. So the Convention on Genocide is important, as is the 2006 Convention on Intervention. For myself, I think this is one of the most important developments that we've had since the war, that the United Nations passed the Convention on Intervention. Those of you who know the story of the Shoah know that in the 1930s, people said we can't do anything in Germany because it's an internal matter, and we can't interfere in the lives of individual states. Well, now the international community has finally matured and said we can intervene when evil is being done in individual states. So the Convention on Intervention, what the UN called the responsibility to intervene, is, I think, very important. To date, it has not been as functional as it should be in places like Darfur or the Congo or the African Republic, Central African Republic, but it's a harbinger, I think, of a new attitude which will become increasingly important. Also, I would mention the Nuremberg Tribunal, which directly grew out of the Shoah. That was very important. It put governments on notice that the world would take account. So what happened at Nuremberg was then repeated in the Yugoslavian trials, Srebrenica, where the court found for genocide. The reasoning was very poor. And then in Rwanda, where there have been trials. And so the precedent of trials. Now, we haven't cut off genocide or violence because of trials, but I think people think twice about it. At least it's a sign the international community has moved in a new direction. Also, it seems to me that, lastly, I want to mention anti-Semitism. I think Professor Mark mentioned his studies show that the awareness in Poland, for example, of Auschwitz as a site of Jewish martyrdom has gone up. Everywhere in the world, it's clear that that will be a symbol in the future, and it's simply because anti-Semitism has not stopped even after the gas chambers and the crematoria. And we see today the revival, the resuscitation of anti-Semitism in lots of places. I frankly didn't think I would live to see it in my time, so soon after the Shoah. But the fact is, anti-Semitism is a very peculiar kind of prejudice, a kind of peculiar hate. It's not, and I say this with all respect, it's not simply another kind of minority prejudice or xenophobia. The history of the subject, the morphology, the shape of the subject, the endurance of the subject, the polymorphous nature, it takes many shapes of the subject, make it something enduring. So you can be, if you're a communist, the Jews are capitalists. If you're a capitalist, the Jews are communists. If you're religious, the Jews are secular and anti-Christ. If you're not religious. So it's a very peculiar thing. And unfortunately, the future will have to reckon with the significance of anti-Semitism. And Auschwitz will be the perennial, the eternal symbol of what happens when you let that genie out of the bottle, that you let anti-Semitism grow and grow into a many-headed monster and dominate your politics. So that is very important. But I would say, again, something, and I hope on an optimistic note, that fortunately in 2015, the Jewish people are not as isolated as they were in 1939 or 1941. There are friends of the Jewish people. The irony is, perhaps the two best friends of the Jewish people in Europe today are Germany and Poland. So this is significant. And of course, in America, things have changed dramatically over the last 70 years. The state of Israel is, of course, central to the conversation. So we've learned a lot of things. And therefore, we have a lot of study to do about the Shoah, but it's not all bleak, it's not all dark. I think there have been a mixed inheritance for the future, which points to lots of things we have to be aware of. But again, lots of people, sensitive people, intelligent people, morally acute people, have drawn some very important lessons. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Katz. Just to briefly say what your words were, Auschwitz will remaining a symbol or a place for blocking any kind of revival of the evil. Let's hope you will be right. And now I pass the floor to Professor Trojański. And another time I put the same question about future. What will, in your opinion, be the importance of this place for the future?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to explain why I'm here, because as you can see from the program, Dr. Stawiski was supposed to be on my seat, but he's feeling not well now and asked me to say a few words. So what I will be talking, that will be only my opinion. This is not museums or Dr. Stawiski, so we had no chance to even to talk about it. So only a few remarks, ad hoc reflections on the topic that I was not supposed to tackle. According to the idea of the conference, that I was one of the co-organizers. So as you can see, We just invented the question, but we did not, discuss this question before the conference so much. Well, as you know, I'm a historian and educator, and the didactician also. So I will refer to more to the issue of education, or education about Auschwitz and Holocaust education. In terms of the question about the significance of Auschwitz in the future. But first, I would like to say that what does it mean, the future? So future, when we are talking about the future, we should consider many factors, the long or short term period, and whether or not we can predict, and as my colleague already said, it is impossible to predict the future. We can learn from the past. This is also controversial, and I don't believe that always we can learn even from the past. So talking about the future is much more difficult than about the past. So I will be talking about the past, and because it's easy. Why? Because the future is rooted in the past, and the future is also rooted in the present, and in what is going nowadays. So I think that few processes and the tendencies that are going now, they will be continuing in the future. So I can say that what I'm going to say, it will be a kind of the future. But what are the conditions that we should take into account when we are talking about the future? There are two things very important. One is the institution, so this is the museum that is responsible for education about Auschwitz and also about the Holocaust. But as you know, the Holocaust is not. Holocaust is only a part of the mission that the museum has. And the second issue is the relevance of the lessons that Auschwitz can teach us nowadays. So we already heard about the several lessons, and I think that some of them are still relevant, but not all of them. And so once we answer the questions about the institution and about the relevance of the lessons that could be drawn, then we can perhaps predict what will be the future of this of Auschwitz. And talking about the institutions, so as you know, the Auschwitz Museum was created in 1947, just after the war. That was the first museum in the world that was dedicated to the Second World War and also to the Holocaust. No one used the term the Holocaust at the time, so we talk about the Jewish fate or the Jewish martyrology at the time. But the first exhibition created in 1947, it also including the Holocaust. That was only one room, but very important, that told the story about millions people who perished in Auschwitz. So the number that were, mentioned that time, and also the name of the museum, they, I would say, give us the perspective of looking at Auschwitz for many years. Why? Because the million, as you know, the first number was about 4 million people who perished in Auschwitz, was actual until the end of the communists, and only in the beginning of 90s, the Polish historians, even they knew already before that date that it's incorrect, they were able publicly to admit that it's incorrect. And the recent, research told us that the number of victims is about 1.1 million, and about 1.5 million people were deported to Auschwitz. So the number accounts presented before, they told us the scale of the mass murder committed here. And the second issue is the name of the museum. As you know, according to the Polish resolution of the Polish Parliament, the museum was declared at that time as the place of Polish martyrdom and the place of martyrdom of other nations. other nations, so it referred to the idea of presenting the story of people deported from many countries, various countries, to Auschwitz. Nothing was said about Jewish, nothing was said about the ethnicity of the victims at the time, and the question is whether or not it could be said at the time, whether any people who were interested in such a perspective of looking at Auschwitz. Those who created the museum were mostly Polish political prisoners, so this is obvious that they took care about their own fate, I mean the fate of Polish political prisoners. And they wanted to tell the story, their own stories, not the story of Jewish people who were deported there and immediately, you know, murdered at that time. So the perspective of looking at the partings at the Auschwitz at the time was mostly Polish, and additionally mostly international perspective. And the whole activity of International Auschwitz Committee that was established in 1952, and the idea of creating the national pavilions and also the monument for the victims of fascism in Birkenau that was erected in 1967, it gives us another perspective of the internationalism, or, you know, we would call the process of internationalization of the victims. So we had two processes, one the Polonization and then internationalization. And still the question of the ethnicity of the victim was not current, was not the most important, even though they were commemorated, as I mentioned in the first exhibition, and then also at the Jewish Pavilion, opened 1968 and renewed in 1978. But that was not the essential issue. Situation has changed in the 80s, and that was related with the conflict of memories, the memory of Auschwitz as the place of Polish martyrdom, place of Jewish martyrdom, and also, you know, the conflicting religious memories. And as a result of it, we had a process called Judaization of the victims. I'm referring to the research done by Professor Marek Kucia, who wrote a book about it. And what we have now, because I'm going to the future, so let me stop for a while now. So we try to balance, you know, the different various narratives. Because Auschwitz for many years abroad was the symbol of the Holocaust. Abroad, in Poland, was a symbol mostly of Polish martyrdom. We, as the museum, try to change the perspective since, you know, the communist collapse and many activities undertaken at the museum. For example, the changing the description at the monuments and also new way of guiding narratives. It shows us many various perspectives. And we would like to commemorate different group of victims. As you know, since the late of the 80s, a new group of victims, as a Sinti and Roma, appeared in Auschwitz, and it was included into the narrative of this place. So we also talk about the Soviet prisoners of war and other group of the victims. So the country of origins is not anymore important, but the ethnicity of the victims. The Jewish people, Polish people, Romani people, and, you know, this different group of Slavic people. So we changed the perspective from the one national or international into the one group of a few group of ethnic group of people. And there is still conflict, I would say. And let me quote the words by Jonathan Weber. As you know, this is a very well-known British historian, a former member of the International Auschwitz Committee, and in the beginning of the 90s, he was very much involved in the changing the museum and introducing the new way on narrative. And he wrote an essay about the future of Auschwitz that was in 1992, as you know, more than 20 years from now. And I think that a few, you know, ideas, reflections by Jonathan Weber are still current. And he wrote, Auschwitz is the conflict, in short, between reality and symbol, between the history and myth, between visible and invisible. And this is the central problem about the future of Auschwitz. I think that this perspective is still current, and we still can say that this is the problematic. But if I would ask about the future, I would rather tell not about the image of Auschwitz, but rather of the challenges that we still have and that we will have in the future. So there are many challenges. So because I would talk longer, but I will have for sure opportunity to continue now. Let me only mention the few problems. So one issue is the role of the museum, and the second issue is role of the education about Auschwitz and the Holocaust in situ, in the site, and in general. As we could hear today, this morning, this afternoon session, and also yesterday during the morning session, so the effectiveness of teaching about the Auschwitz and the Holocaust in general is not as we could envision and expect. So I'm a little bit skeptical. So I know what Professor Katz said, that on the international level there has been a lot of initiative, and those initiatives are working, because we can see it from the international perspective of law, but on the education I would not be so optimistic. So we heard that yesterday, for example, that from the research done by Ms. Anna, I forget the name, sorry, from Warsaw, from the Center for the Prejudice and Dialogue Among the Nation. So the research showed that the more we teach about the Holocaust Polish students, the more they are xenophobic. And you know, the attitudes towards the Jews, among others, are, you know, better. So the anti-Semitism is not reduced. And today we also heard from Orit Margaliot that the Israeli students who come to Poland are very anti-Polish and prejudiced. And the visit to Poland does not change it so much. Of course, it depends on the visit in general. But it shows us the state of affairs, the state of the situation. So I think that we should do a lot in order to, you know, maybe to change the way how the Holocaust education is being done. But we should also reflect about the possible goals that we design when we are talking about Auschwitz. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trojański. Thank you very much for your words. Thank you for these final words about challenges. You touched very interesting subject. But our panelists have presented their views. Ladies and gentlemen, think about preparing your own questions to them. I will give you time for this. We still have much time to debate. I was listening to all your words, all your thoughts on the future and on the question what the role Auschwitz will be playing or will play in future, near future, distant future. And I would like to ask you about the problem of abusing Auschwitz memory, because most of you have said that Auschwitz will be a powerful symbol of preserving memory of genocide, of keeping the ideology of human rights, international peace existing, of importance of international cooperations, of fighting against extremism. But I can also say, looking at the world around us, that Auschwitz memory can also be abused. For instance, the current conflict in the between Russia and Ukraine. One side, let's call it generally Russian side, says because of the memory of Shoah, Auschwitz and fascism, we have to do this and this and this. The West and most of the politicians in Ukraine say because of the memory of what happened during the Second World War, we have to prevent what Russia is doing. And I have visited recently Russia, and although I do not share that view, I have seen that, of course, the propaganda about events is very strong in eastern Ukraine is very strong, but some fears of Russian people are genuine. The Russian people have genuine fears about extremism, and the Ukrainian people, when I talk to them, they also have genuine fear about extremism and about being humiliated by a powerful neighbor, and they all point to the memories of the Second World War, to the memories of fascism. So both sides can, in a sense, use the same memory to do completely opposite things. And the West is also taking the memory of the Second World War, the memory of fascism, as a symbol of doing, or sometimes not doing, that's another matter, some things. So how to prevent the abusing of the memory of Auschwitz, even in the old continent, in Europe, where Auschwitz is located? So I put that question to all the panelists. Who wants to answer? Professor Lipowicz?
I think, as Professor Katz said, it's sometimes really symbol of the absolute evil. But it can be also at the same time still very concrete in education also. Sometimes we hear generally about Auschwitz, and but there were, as we see here in this room with all these photos, also in this educational project, behind the symbol are 100,000, over a million concrete people with their families and story. And I'm afraid when we are too abstract, and also for me is a problem that sometimes the people who want to minimize the machine of the Hitler state, but the machine, also the people from administration, from judges, technical, chemical, even Nobel Prize winner who made the gas cyclone. 100,000 of the people, and sometimes we speak so generally in Europe, and this the both sides, the people who suffered so much and died, and the people who did it, they disappear. And even in the narration of Israel or very prominent historian, we sometimes speak so generally. What I would need to prevent this, what you say, it's still to keep the example of the evil, but in the very concrete activity of the people, of the concrete people. For instance, because it's also abstract what I'm saying now, what could be example how to prevent and how to deal with it. We spoke in the first part how difficult it is to bring this narration to the story to the VIP person, to the politicians. And wonderful example which I saw and which we used also was there is a screenplay, there is a story wrote, you can make it as a theater, a documentary theater. It's a story of after Kristall, it's not directly Auschwitz, but Auschwitz came from this situation. It is government of the Dritten Reich of German government after Kristallnacht. After Kristallnacht, suddenly it was clear that the purpose was not fulfilled because the people who suffered should receive money for because it was quite regular that they pay for their houses, or then they should receive now after damages the man. And this meeting, when suddenly the members of the German government say what we could make more. For instance, the Jews, we could prevent that they could go and with the car or in public transport, or maybe we could prevent that they could use the public sport places. And one step after another, and it was so interesting for the policymakers because they could see this abstract evil on the example of the political activity. So I think we should bring all this abstract idea to the very clear situation in the activity of different groups, because I'm afraid that it would disappear in such wonderful speeches, only very general, and then each situation could be Auschwitz in political fight. And we spoke also before that how is the situation of, for instance, Poland, on Hungary, on other countries, which we have had also communist time with the communist crimes. Sometimes, so it's very difficult to teach one and another at the same time. We have wonderful examples and books when you can show it to the younger generation. For instance, the book of and the story of Kazimierz Moczarski, Conversation with Executioner. Moczarski was one of the most brave anti-Hitler guerrilla under Polish underground fighter in Warsaw. And after the war, because this part of anti-Hitler movement was anti-communist also, the communists put him to the prison, also with death sentence, for long years. But it was additional torture that because he spent this year with Strop, with the man who really was the main man for war crimes for Warsaw Ghetto. And Moczarski spent this year with Strop, and then he used this time. He tried to understand how the evil came, how this man, what was his childhood, how he could believe Hitler, how was his individual way leading to the mass killing in ghetto. And his position was quite another as the position of the judge or journalist, because they spent years together in very small space, and it was the will of communists to put him, one of our absolute heroes, fighting against Strop, with him together to the same cell. We have thousands of such examples, and we have many of such books where you can compare the communist time and also the time of Hitler, and both sorts of crime. And I'm very grateful for this example of the human rights development coming here from reflection of Auschwitz. So I brought also to this room all ombudsmen of Europe, and they made a declaration on human rights here, just here. And I would be very happy if this conference, maybe it's already so, it should be annual conference. It should come each year. We have to come together to compare the experience, to prevent the danger, to make this, the Auschwitz experience banal or dull or something self-evident, and to reflect how to teach the next generation. So I would, my wish would be, it would be the first annual conference on this reflection, and if you agree, please. Huh? Yeah. So accepted. Thank you very much.
Motion accepted.
Yeah.
Motion accepted. Thank you very much, Professor Lipowicz. Anyone else would like to answer my question, how to prevent abusing of Auschwitz memory? Professor Marek Kucia.
Well, let me answer this question at two levels, so in two aspects. First would be the Polish one, and the second would be a wider context, exceeding Poland, but also concerning Poland. Well, until 2009, I thought that Auschwitz is one of the sacred things, jedna ze świętości, until the Arbeitmacht-frei sign was stolen from the entrance to Auschwitz. I believed that Auschwitz cannot be abused. That's a very physical, very tangible imagery, that someone could steal something which is so telling. But we had instances of Auschwitz abuse. We had an instance of Auschwitz denial in Poland a couple of years before 2009, an infamous instance. I shall not refer to more details in this honorable gathering. So Auschwitz is no longer, or perhaps has never been, a sacred thing in this country, or maybe it was long ago. It may be abused, and it is abused. In the city where I live, in Kraków, you can see anti-Semitic graffiti, which is painted by some football fans of one of the Krakowian teams against some football team fans of another Krakowian team, and they use not only anti-Semitic slogans, but they also abuse Auschwitz in this graffiti. Now, but at the everyday level, do we have a wide-scale phenomenon of this kind? That's a question which sociologists would ask themselves. We are interested in mass-scale, wide-scale social phenomena. I wouldn't say that we have got a problem of Auschwitz abuse in this country other than the instances that I mentioned. If I were to survey people, I think they would reject this sort of behavior. They would criticize this overtly. But still, we've got the instances. Now let me refer to a wider level, because the question the chairman asked was at a political level, at an international level. Memory, remembrance, is about power. It's about power relations. What groups remember is that what they want to remember, and they want others to remember about themselves or others. That's taken for granted in memory studies. Now, so it's not unexpected that we have, and we will have, the instances of abuse of Auschwitz in various contexts. Now, what can be done about it? In a polycentric world we are living in, globally and also nationally in this country, that where we have a plurality of agents, political agents and memory agents. It's up to those agents to react. You cannot prevent the abuse of Auschwitz, but you can react to this, and I think the key role for this would be for the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, and this is what Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum has been doing, reacting against the abuse of Auschwitz. But there are also other agents, civil society organizations, academics, international organizations such as IRA, which are instrumental in and developing the remembrance of Auschwitz, they also have and will react against this abuse of Auschwitz. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Katz, would you like to comment?
It's very difficult to prevent, of course, this sort of misuse, abuse. I just think in America we've had examples of Auschwitz being used by animal rights protesters and likening it. Now, I'm not in favor of the abuse of animals. I have a son who's a veterinarian, but that was clearly an abuse. We had a case where labor union was in dispute, and they argued that first they came for the X, you all know the famous phrase, they came for the Y, and now they've come for our labor rights. Also, it's been abused in America in the debate over abortion, the whole debate over fetuses and death, and so it has widespread abuse. I would say that the comment that was just correctly made, that people criticize the theft of the sign and are very quick often to criticize, is a good sign. It shows, I think, a couple of things. One, as I said earlier, that it shows how important Auschwitz is, that everybody abuses it. You wouldn't abuse something that's unimportant. So this is confirmation of its importance. You take it and you want to use it for your own energy, for your own initiative. So it's again a confirmation of the importance. Secondly, I think the situation in democratic societies is one in which one has to hope that you have a prosperous and free press, and the TV stations and the radio stations and the major newspapers are all sensitive. It strikes me that very, very important that civic society express itself, and it usually does that by various public representations, but especially the press, I think is extremely important. IRA, an organization I have the privilege of being part of, we try always to do what Professor Kucia mentioned. We always issue statements immediately when something is amiss. And I'm always reminded of the American statement that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, that one has to be vigilant and aggressive in these matters. But I say that one should be aware you cannot stop it, certainly in countries that are less free. And also, one has to not exaggerate the abuses. You know, people get very, very excited sometimes, but you have to ask the proportional question. Was this something that is so important that it's disproportional about the society we live in? We mustn't exaggerate these abuses. I have the feeling we often do, because it's such a sexy subject. It's such a provocative issue. It raises the temperature right away that a lot of these things should not get the kind of attention. And in fact, giving them so much attention is exactly what the people who manipulate these abuses want. If we would ignore them, they would probably not do it and we would be better off. So it's a complicated subject. I would just say, you can't defeat it, you can't frustrate this altogether, but I think that there are ways in which, certainly in democratic societies, that we can control the kind of abuse and shame those who misuse it, who throw it into a spotlight in which we say this is just ignorance, this is just malice, this is just hate speech, and hopefully that will convince enough of the population of its impotence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katz. Dr. Trojański. Dr. Trojański, your comment?
Yeah, I would like to add that one of the problem in terms of abusing the memory of Auschwitz is a so-called politicization of Auschwitz, and the memory of victims, and in general but the second one is the issue of simplification the story, or melodramatization. So this afternoon we also talk about it. And of course the exaggeration of the role that Auschwitz could play. So we should avoid an approach that Auschwitz could give us the answers to any problems ever that the humanity has and we are facing every day. But the problem, so how to do it? So it's impossible to prevent, but of course we can do our best in order to limit it as much as possible. And we, as the educators and also, you know, the staff of the memorials, we should be very sensitive about any acts of such actions. And of course, we don't need to exaggerate it, because we do not react to every, you know, incident. But if it's serious and if we think that it could damage the memory of the victims, we should react immediately. Of course, it's difficult to recognize which is, you know, serious, which is not serious. But in my opinion, you know, once we are listening to the speeches of the politicians, not only in Poland but also abroad, who would like to use the Auschwitz and the Holocaust as a kind of justification of the politics, and the politics that create the hatred about, you know, against the other people, that's something that it should be reacted. And I am also a member of IRA, and we are the international organization that take actions always where such cases are happening. So that's one of the possibility of doing so. As a conclusion, taking out Auschwitz from the political context, that's one of the very important things. It is very difficult, you know, it is very difficult because we organize the commemoration and trying to invite as many as possible VIPs and people from abroad, because we believe that this is the way how to promote, you know, the issue, and how to also, you know, alert the world. But some of such actions and the politicians could misuse, abuse the Auschwitz and the memory of the sites, you know, by similar actions.
I would like just to personally say that thinking about education, about the role of the museum, I also have some personal experience about how the activities of a museum after the events of the war, of this museum, can influence even me personally. I became very active in the Polish-German reconciliation among youth, among Catholics and Lutheran youth from Poland and Germany in mid-80s, when I met people who, after the war, as East Germans and West Germans, came here to atone for the sins, and they were clearing the areas of the museum. They were talking about the experiences of their nations and their feelings about German role in the war, and it's so powerfully experienced me, the activities after the Second World War of the museum, that it's still, I still remember that meeting as one of the most important moments of my professional life, because I have used this Polish-German experience under communists during the martial law times. I was just a secondary school teacher, a member of a ecumenical group, but it was so important experience for me. The activities of the museum after, so it will never be a typical museum-only place. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. Thank you very much, the public.
This fascinating discussion.
Final word, yes?
Final word.
Yes.
Yes. Honorable survivors, dear Batsheva, dear guests. At the end of our meeting, I wish to thank you sincerely for your arrival, presence, and active participation in the conference. Your words, dear survivors, pronounced and also sung, are engraved deeply in our memory. We highly value every remark, question, or conclusion of the participants who have entered into this dialogue. We will be considering thoughts and opinions expressed here in days to come, and they will remain with us for a long time. Personally, I feel really honored that we have hosted so many highly regarded and eminent experts. I am more than satisfied with the effectiveness of this debate. Also, let me take this opportunity to thank those who with eagerness engaged themselves into organizing the conference, my colleagues from the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, in particular from the International Center of Education about Auschwitz and the Holocaust. Moreover, I would like to share with you our plans for organizing a conference marking the 70th anniversary of the museum establishment in July 2017. Already today, I am inviting you to take part in this event. I believe that our activity and initiative will contribute to creating the space for respect and tolerance in the surrounding world, respect for the past, as well as hope for the future. Therefore, I conclude with a quotation from the Bible, Book of Deuteronomy, 2nd words. And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshipping things the Lord, your God, has apportioned to all the nations under heaven. Thank you very much.